Hello fellow brawlers, I'm KairosTime, and it is time to brawl, and it is also time for some sweet, sweet balance changes. Now you guys know that a 5% buff to one brawler is not the same as a 5% buff to another brawler, so I've actually taken the time to calculate exactly which interactions are actually going to change between the brawlers. I'm going to break these down so that you can actually make sense of what these balance changes actually mean, like in the middle of combat. And if you like what you see, I'd appreciate you subscribing. We're almost at 400,000 subscribers, guys. And if you're already subscribed, I'd appreciate using code Kairos in the Brawl Stars shop. Also, before we get started, you should know that Supercell didn't give me a developer build of these balance changes, so I don't actually have any before and after comparisons to show you, but we're going to talk about all that good stuff. Let's start off by talking about Colt, who is getting a 7% damage buff to both his attack and his super. Each bullet is increasing in damage from 420 to 448 damage. Now, for reference, that's actually the same amount of damage from a single Rico bullet, but Colt actually shoots one more projectile per ammo, so his total potential damage is actually higher than Rico's. This means that Colt will be able to take out 19 of the 33 brawlers with one less projectile. Now, the only brawlers that will require one less ammo, which is different than a projectile, right? Many projectiles per single ammo for Colt. That means that the only brawlers are going to be Mortis and Sandy that are going to require an entire less ammo. So this isn't actually a very big buff to Colt, but he certainly needed it as he's kind of been outshined by a lot of like the long range damage dealers that have been released into the game recently. So we'll actually see if he's actually competitive in this next meta. Up next is Dynamike, who is getting a 5% damage buff to his attack. Each Dynamite is going to increase in damage from 1064 to 1120 damage. This is exactly the same amount of damage as Nita's attack. So like if you get hit by both Dynamites, it's like getting hit in the face by two Nita attacks instantly. This means that Dynamike will be able to take out 13 of the 33 brawlers with one less projectile, one less dynamite, but it's actually going to change quite a few interactions with brawlers. This means that he's going to be able to take out the following brawlers with one less ammo: Darryl, Frank, Jesse, Leon, Penny, and Tara. Now this is assuming that both of his shots actually do hit, but it's actually a significant change for Dynamike. Primo is up next, getting a 3% buff to his HP. 3%? Sounds like a lot, right? Well, I don't know, kinda. At max level, he's going from 8,120 health to 8,400 health. For reference, this is actually still slightly less than Frank before the balance changes, but he's still going to be the second tankiest brawler in the game. This means that Primo will be able to survive one more projectile from 9 of the 33 brawlers, which isn't really that impressive. He'll also be able to survive one complete attack from Jesse, Poco, Spike, and Tick. Now, in total, we're talking about an additional 280 health. Primo is arguably the worst tank in the game before balance changes, and I think that this will help him, but I don't think it's going to help him very much. Next, we have Ems, who is getting 2 buffs. First is her 6% buff to her health. Her max health is being increased from 5,040 to 5,320, which is the same amount of health as Mortis and Sandy. This means that she'll be able to survive one more projectile from 14 of the 33 brawlers in the game. And that does sound pretty good, but what's actually really impactful is the fact that she's going to be able to survive one more complete attack from Carl, Frank, Max, Mortis, Penny, Sandy, and Tara. Now for her second buff, her hype star power is getting buffed by 33%. What that means is that the healing per enemy within her circle is going to increase from 300 to 400 health per second. Now, I really like to compare this star power to Leon's Invisi-Heal star power, which heals him for 1,000 health per second for 6 seconds, which is a possible 6,000 health healed total. And if he wants to, he can actually choose to get all of that healing by not going visible until the time is up. Ems' hype star power heals 400 per second for 5 seconds, which is a possible 2,000 healing with one enemy, 4,000 healing with 2 enemies, and 6,000 healing with 3 enemies staying in her circle for all 5 seconds. The only time when hype is as good as Invisi-Heal is when she has 3 enemies in her circle up close to her, but in that type of situation, there's a good chance she's going to be killed either way. So I don't really think this buff is going to make hype the star power choice for Ems. I will mention that Supercell doesn't buff star powers outside of brawlers. Their goal is to get 50% with each star power for each individual brawler. So what really matters is hype versus bad karma, but you guys kind of get the idea. I still think that her bad karma star power is going to be the best option most of the time. Now let's talk about Ems' uncle, Frank, who is also getting a buff, a health buff, even more health. It's going up by 5%, which means that it's increasing from 8,540 to 8,960 at max level. This means that with his sponge star power, Frank is officially the first brawler to pass 10,000 health. That is a lot of health, but will it be actually good enough to make Frank pretty viable? We'll talk about that. This is going to make it so that 15 out of the 33 brawlers are going to require one more projectile to finish Frank off. He will now survive one more complete attack from Bo, Tara, Mortis, Penny, and Sandy. And honestly, I don't actually know how much this is going to impact Frank's viability. Frank was already super tanky, and in games like Brawl Stars, tanks are typically able to ignore attacks from enemy players. But in Brawl Stars, getting hit by enemies actually charges up their super, which is bad for Frank, and it's also bad for his teammates. Now, with all that said, we are talking about a 420 health buff to the tankiest brawler in the game. So I'm hopeful that Frank will be a little bit more viable, but we'll have to see. Guys, Leon is getting a buff. Leon's damage at max range is being buffed by 73%. As a reminder, max range is when he deals the least amount of damage. Before, his projectiles would deal 144 damage at max range, and that is being increased to 249 damage at max range. Now, Leon's maximum damage, when he's like up close to a brawler, that is not changing at all, but this means that he'll be able to do a much better job at a distance than he used to. Also, this means that he's going to be able to charge up his super much easier at a distance because his super actually charges up based off of how much damage he does. So not only will Leon be able to deal with brawlers at a distance much better, but he's also going to be able to use his super more frequently as well. Leon was one of the worst brawlers in the game before these balance changes, and this is a pretty significant buff to his abilities. I'm actually really curious to see how this impacts him. But one thing's for sure, this is going to make him a lot more viable now. Pam is up next, getting a 7% health buff. Supercell's really liking these health buffs. Her health at max level is increasing from 6,300 health to 6,720, which is actually the same amount of health that Darryl currently has. This means that she's going to require one additional ammo from 16 of the 33 brawlers, and that is pretty significant. She's now going to survive one more complete shot from other Pams, Bo, Ems, Mortis, Penny, Piper, Poco, Sandy, and Shelly. Okay, now Pam had one of the lowest pick rates in the game, but she actually had a pretty decent win rate overall, at least, you know, a decent one for having such a low pick rate. I think this is going to encourage more people to use her, and I think that she's going to go from being one of the worst brawlers in the game to being like average, maybe slightly below average. Poco's health is getting a 5% buff. At max level, his health is increasing from 5,320 to 5,600 health, and for reference, that is the same amount of health as Nita. Now, this means that Poco is going to be able to survive one more projectile from 11 of the 33 brawlers, and he will now survive one more complete attack from 8-Bit, BB, Crow, and, of course, other Pocos. Now, I don't actually think that this is that great of a buff for Poco, but I think that Poco is going to be much better now due to the fact that many brawlers are getting health buffs, especially the tankier brawlers, right? His Da Capo star power is like so strong right now, and it'll be even more useful now as the meta is gonna like start shifting a little bit more towards like a tank meta. Up next, guys, we got a buff going to Spike. At max level, each spike damage is increasing from 672 to 728 damage. This means that an attack landing 3 spikes worth of damage will deal 2,184 damage, and that is a lot of damage. Spike is now going to be able to take out 11 of the 33 brawlers with one less projectile, and he's actually going to be able to take out Carl, El Primo, and Mr. P with one less ammo. Now, that is assuming he hits them with like one complete max attack with like 3 damages worth of attack. You get the idea. Now, the number of interaction changes isn't as impressive as like some of the other balance changes, but the percentage is higher than most of the other changes. Overall, I think that Spike started to become a little bit more like outshined by some of the newer brawlers, and I think this is going to help him a bit more. I don't think he's gonna be super amazing, especially with so many tanks getting like health buffs, and Spike is kind of like an anti-tank brawler, but I do think that Spike is gonna at least be a little bit more worth it to play after these changes. Okay, up next we got Tick, who's getting a damage buff. Don't worry, Don't worry, it's not as bad as you guys might think, or maybe, I don't know. His damage being buffed by 6%. At max level, the damage from each mine is going from 896 to 952 damage. Now, this is actually going to hardly change any of his interactions with other brawlers. He'll be able to take out only 4 of the 33 brawlers with 1 less mine. And now only El Primo and Nita will require 1 less complete attack from Tick, assuming all 3 hit them. I know that Tick is one of the most annoying brawlers to play against, so I'm okay with him being not super great, but he actually has a very low pick rate above 700 trophies, and he has the 2nd lowest win rate above 700 trophies, and the 5th lowest win rate below 700 trophies. Tick simply just was not good. A 6% buff sounds like a lot, but the interactions was what really matters with other brawlers, so I don't think it's going to be super great still. B's Honeycoat star power is getting a buff and a nerf. The shield duration is increasing from 0.9 seconds to 2.5 seconds, which is exactly what it was when she was first released, right? And we remember how OP that was, but it's only going to be able to trigger 1 time per match, just like 8-Bit's Extra Life. Now, the fact that B could actually survive 1 more shot before dying from every brawler, no matter who they were, for every life that she had, I mean, that was a kind of a cool mechanic, but it was just game-breaking in modes like Bounty or Duo Showdown, where she could get a ton of value out of it over and over and over again. This way, she's going to be able to escape much easier because she's going to have more time to do that, but she's going to have to be a lot more careful after using it that 1 time. With this change, I think the Insta-B load is actually going to be the better of the 2 star powers most of the time, but Honeycoat is still going to get some use in Bounty and Duo Showdown, and maybe a little bit of other places as well. Speaking of extra lives, 8-Bit's Extra Life star power is getting nerfed again. He is no longer going to be invincible after he respawns. So once he comes back to life, he'd better hope that his enemies don't have enough ammo to eat through all of his health, because he's going to have to try to run away while he reloads his shots and is he actually even be able to refire against people, right? 8-Bit with Extra Life was just game breaking, especially in Showdown. This way, he's still going to come back, but he's going to have to try and escape as soon as he's back. I'm actually really curious to see how this is going to impact his star power's viability, but I do think that it's going to be really helpful still in some modes, since Boosted Booster doesn't actually provide a ton of value in like Showdown, for example. Surprise, surprise, guys. Mr. P is getting a nerf to his attack range by 12.5%. Now, what this means is that without his handle with Care Star Power and without any walls or objects or anything like that to increase his range, his attack range is going from 8 1/3 tiles down to 7 1/3 tiles. He's getting an entire tile nerf to his range, which is a massive change. Most range nerfs or buffs actually only happen 1/3 of a tile at a time, so this is actually really significant. Now, with his handle with Care Star Power, his max range is going from 11 1/3 tiles down to 10 1/3 tiles. This means that he's going to have the same effective range as Brock, which is still actually very impressive, right? What this means is that he's going to lose that advantage against those long-range snipers like Piper, B, or even Brock. This is a significant nerf to Mr. P. I don't think he's going to be the best brawler in the game anymore, but I still think he's going to be above average, especially because people play him for his turret, not necessarily for his range. His turret is just so good. Carl's Protective Pirouette star power is getting a 25% nerf to its damage reduction. The damage reduction is going from 40% down to 30%, which is actually pretty significant, okay? If you guys remember, this is the same amount of damage reduction as it was way back before it got buffed in August of last year. Back then, almost nobody used this star power. They were using Power Throw, so I actually think this is gonna make Protective Pirouette a much less viable option. I think that Carl's a really great brawler, and more people are starting to recognize that. I still think that he's gonna be really solid after this small change, but he's definitely not gonna be that like meta option that everybody's playing. Last up, we have Darryl, whose Steel Hoops star power is getting a duration nerf by 64%. That is right, guys. The duration of his shield is going from 2.5 seconds after he supers down to 0.9 seconds. Basically, he's only going to be shielding while he's rolling, and then he'll be right back to receiving regular damage once he's reached his destination. In my opinion, this is a very significant nerf to this star power, and I think that rolling reload is going to be my go-to star power until Steel Hoops either gets buffed again, or if I just happen to find out that I'm wrong, which, I mean, we'll see what happens. And that is all the balance changes. This is happening either like now or it's already happened, or it will happen really soon. I was personally hoping for a nerf to Sandy and a buff to Shelly, but I actually think that these balance changes are really solid. They took like the best brawlers and nerfed them. They take the worst brawlers and buffed them for the most part. But I'm really curious to know what you guys think of all these changes. So let me know in the comment section below, and let me know what you're excited for, as well as if there are brawlers that you feel like they missed. For now, guys, this is KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in Brawl Stars.